tonight? Good evening and welcome to the May 11th, 2022 Finance Committee of the City Council. Committee members present, Councilors Cruz, myself, Councilor Di Natale, Vice President Van Hazinga, and Councilor Boschman. We will begin with call to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone else in the audience who is recording this meeting to please identify themselves for the record now by standing and stating their name and address. Seeing none, at this time I ask that all electronic devices be placed into silent mode. Not for a committee meeting. The public has been advised to contact the city clerk's office regarding any comments of no more than 2 minutes. There are no prepared statements, no Zoom, people waiting on Zoom. I invite anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to please approach the podium, identify yourself by name and address, and identify the agenda item on which you would like to speak, and then you may speak on it for no more than 2 minutes. Seeing nobody in the audience for public comment, we will begin with the agenda. Councilors, we will take up the first, is it four? Four, yes. The first 4 items on the agenda, 13522, 13622, 10322, and 10422. 10422 and 10322 were orders that were held in committee pending the issuance of the above ordinances, 13522 and 13622, which we now have. So I'm going to take these all together and ask for one vote on, or I'm sorry, we have to do the ordinances separately, and then package together 103 and 104 if you wish, or we can do them all separately. We'll get to that at that time. So 13522 and 13622 are ordinances amending Chapter 44 of the City of Fitchburg City Code as outlined in the enclosed ordinance. That includes the table, and the second one includes the matrix. And then 10322 and 10422 involve transfers out of available funds and within personal services for the enterprise funds to fund a recently ratified 3-year contract. I'm sorry. This is to fund the administrative positions in the city, department heads, non-union personnel. So all 4 of these items, the 2 ordinances, the table and the matrix, coincide with the orders 10322 and 10422, all dealing with non-union personnel in the city. And Mayor Di Natale, you have anything to state on this?
Thank you, councilors, and thank you to the Finance Committee for giving me this opportunity. This ordinance addresses an issue that we did not address last year because of the COVID issue. We did hold up on doing that because we were looking at doing a salary survey. However, again, because of the impact of COVID, that was put aside. So we're taking this action, I should say, to address that 1 year of lack of a cost of living increase. And as you can see by the agenda items in the agenda, it's a 2.5% increase. And again, they did not receive a COLA last year, and some were scheduled for step increases, but not all. But that's the straightforward approach to what we're doing today with these agenda items. Any questions?
Councilor Boschman.
You said it was because of COVID-19 that we didn't act on the upgrades?
The salary survey. We wanted to do a salary survey, Councilor, before we increased or went with the COLA. The COLA is ultimately up to me as the mayor, and we decided not to because we want that cost of the salary survey is important to remain competitive in the area, and that's what we thought would be the best approach. Didn't work out because of the difficulties with COVID. I mean, that kind of put everything on a back burner.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, on your survey, on the pay raises around the area,
Yeah, we haven't done that,
Oh, you haven't
Counselor.
done
We haven't
that?
done that yet, no. No, but again, because of, we're just beginning to see, we're just beginning to come out of the COVID issues that have gone on for the last 2 years. So we will, at some point, pursue a salary survey, because I would like to know where we are for some of these department heads, where we are in the area. And as I
I would
mentioned.
too.
Yeah, to remain competitive. Perhaps we're fine, I don't know. Let's take a look at it, and we will.
Now, Mike, Mr. Chair, you don't mind if I keep asking a couple of questions? Last year, I think we had a big controversy on the budget, even though we weren't here in person. I haven't got the budget, I just asked Kelvin if he had it. Some of the wages in here went up $4,000 or $5,000 at a whack on your proposed budget last year in some of the departments. So I'm having a hard time when I see these coming in front of me again for a cost of living increase, whereas last year's budget, you had $45,000 increases in pay.
You'd have to be more specific, Counselor. What are we talking about? What positions?
I would have to say, if I recall right, if I'm not mistaken, I thought it was the planning department in that building, in that department.
Counselor, can we have the auditor?
A lot of the planning board, a lot of the planning department employees are under the famous contract. So they're not governed by this ordinance.
These are non-contractual employees. That's what this is
So are you
involved.
telling me those $4,000 and $5,000 that we gave last year in the budget was all union workers' wages increases?
If you're talking about community development, all except the department head are covered by the famous union.
Right.
All right.
Well, just, Counsel, on that note, just to clarify, there's a cost of living adjustment, whether it's contractual or non-contractual, which is what this is. This is a cost of living adjustment, correct? For non-contractual employees. How often do we do this? It's every couple of years, right? Every few years, we update the matrix. I mean...
It's really up to the mayor.
Right,
but-
so, when we look at the budget and we see the increases, there are some years where the increases are visibly large, because there may be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Auditor, there's a step with a contractual increase, right? There's two different types of increases, right? There's the COLA adjustment, and then there's a step increase. Correct? Yes, sir. So there are some years where you might see that 4,000 or 5,000 because they're getting both. And I think the step is every 2 years, whereas the contractual is every year. So and if you look at the budget, you'll see an increase 1 year of 1,500. That will probably be the contractual piece. And then the next year, you'll see like 4,000, because they got the contractual piece, and then they're every 2 years step adjustment. So some years it looks big, some years it doesn't. Last year, there was a lot of step increases. So I'm expecting to see, from where I sit, this year's budget not reflect those kinds of increases this coming budget, because a lot of the steps happened last year.
Well, one other question for the
Yep, go
mayor.
ahead.
I hope you hurry up with that survey, because every time somebody comes up in your department, or we used to make a recommendation for somebody, and I do my homework, our wages are very, very good compared to the surrounding communities, and I mean very, very good.
Well, Counsel, let's hope that that's what a salary survey demonstrates. And if that's the case, we're fine. But I'd like to see it factually broken out.
All right.
Okay. And, oh, by the way, let me editorialize for a moment. This is an opportunity to reward the department heads that work for the city are doing an outstanding job. And a 2.5% increase is a modest increase for some of what we require them to do in their job. So this is a way to show that appreciation. We appreciate and we recognize the importance that they hold in our city and what they give back to the citizens of Fitchburg.
Do we know when the last increase was? Because it's not 2.5 in 1 year.
No.
They didn't get one last year, if I recall.
So 2 years?
So it's really 2.5 over 2 years.
Right.
I was just gonna say,
It's not,
That's
they
right.
didn't get an increase last year, so they got level salaries, so it's
Right.
really 2.5 over 2 years.
still, that's not bad, 2.5% of it. I remember our contracts were 2.5% over 3 or 4 years.
My company just gave everyone 2.75 for 1 year, so
Counsel, was that when you had to start your car by cranking? Oh, no, okay, never mind. Okay.
any other, are you all set, Counselor?
Yeah, I'm all
Any
set.
other questions?
Thank you,
Before
councilors.
I guess we'll,
Make a motion to approve 13522 and send it to its first reading?
Second?
I have a motion made and seconded to approve 13522 to be sent to its first reading. If there are no discussions, I'll take this under
I
unanimous
just,
consent.
Mr. Chair, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure I understand this now. This has no bearing on the fact that we settled a contract with the fire department and the police department?
Yes,
Nothing at all?
This has nothing to do with any union
Okay.
contractual employees.
all right.
Nothing. That's completely separate.
All right. Go ahead.
If I have no objections to the motion, I'll take this in unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's favorably recommended.
Make a motion to approve 13622 and send it to its first reading?
Second?
Motion made and seconded to send 13622 to its first reading. If I see no objections, I will take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, passes.
Make a motion to approve 10322 and 10422?
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 10322 and 10422, which are the orders transferring the funds to pay for the ordinances that we just approved. If there are no objections, I will take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, they are approved. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors.
Next, we will move to 13222. In order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $65,044 to be charged against available funds and credited to the following accounts. Treasurer Personal Services, $1,138. Police Personal Services, $62,972. And Employee Benefits, Other Benefits, $934. We have Human Resources Director Susan Davis and Police Chief Martineau before us.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you for having us. We, with this particular contract, this is actually now called Mass Cops, which is the Massachusetts Coalition of Police. This particular bargaining unit represents the civilian police dispatchers, the airport line persons, and the parking control officer. Am I missing on it, right? That sounds good to everybody. And so this was formally, oh, actually, no, this has been the second contract with them. So that's, this particular group, the largest issue that we have with this particular group in terms of staffing is definitely with the dispatchers. And so we did a lot of research within the area, within comparable communities, and found that, you know, over the last few years, the rates have been woefully low, and it is very difficult to fill these positions. So the last contract, as well as this one, we did some rearrangement of the wage matrix, and that's what you're going to see for that first appropriation is an increase in those rates. Chief, you want to, and the other positions as well, obviously, we did have some movement as well in that matrix for the airport personnel as well.
So, good evening, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of this contract. This was such an important contract for my department to bring to conclusion and to present it to you this evening. You know, our dispatchers, our 911 dispatchers, that's the first line of defense when anybody's in crisis and they're calling 911. That's the first voice that they hear before emergency personnel is dispatched. As you're well aware, recruitment and retention, not only in police services, but dispatching services is extremely difficult. The average tenure of a police dispatcher in my department is roughly 18 months. When you're thinking that I retain an employee for 18 months, and the first 3 months is in training, I'm only getting about 15 months out of that employee before they're either going to another department to earn better wages, or they're moving on to become police officers. It's very clear that the dispatch room is a feeding zone for police officers, so there's always going to be a level of turnover in that room. But this past year and a half or so, we've lost quite a few dispatchers to other communities, which was a little bit disheartening. They were going for a multitude of reasons. They were going for the simple reason because of the call volume. Dispatches dispatch approximately 55 to 60,000 calls per year on any given night. The 3 to 11 shift could answer the phone 120 times. It's a very demanding job. And in some cases, these young dispatchers would move on and go on to a smaller town where they were making anywhere from $3 to $6 more an hour. As Councilor Boschman asked about comparative wage salary analysis, that's exactly what we did. We went out and we did a comparative wage analysis of all the communities in our general area to include centralized PSAPs, where it's a centralized dispatching area. And we were woefully behind all of the communities in this area. And they were basically stealing our dispatchers, for lack of better terms. We would bring them in, we would train them. They'd be here for 8 to 12 months. And they would go on to another department fully trained, saving that town a significant amount of money. So we knew we had to do something, and quite frankly, the only thing to do was to bring them up to a comparative wage with all the surrounding towns. That being said, I can tell you right now, the city of Leominster is in negotiation with their dispatchers. This contract, if approved and financed through your committee and full council, will bring them slightly higher than Leominster. But unfortunately, the Leominster dispatchers are being represented by Mass Cops too, so I can see some type of teeter-totter going here. But this is definitely a step in the right direction. I can't say enough how appreciative I am of the work that our dispatchers do. That is an extremely stressful and demanding job, and this contract, I think, is well-deserving, and hopefully it does get your support this evening.
Make a motion to approve 13222.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded to approve 13222.
On the motion, one quick question from, I got the...
You can't ask a question unless a motion is withdrawn.
Oh, no, mind.
So if Council Van
You
Huizen...
wanna withdraw?
Withdraw my motion.
One quick question, if Ms. Davis can help verify this, on the civilian dispatches, and this would be 2021, I guess it'd be a step 12, you'll be making $26 an hour at the end?
For
A civilian...
looking at the head airport line person,
Oh, no, it says the
26.
dispatcher.
the dispatch
Yeah,
would be 2536.
I get 2587. But yes,
Are
we're
you looking at the first-
7/1/21. And then, then if you go
Oh, sorry,
to
it's my fault.
7/23, it'd be 2692.
Okay, yeah, you're at, it's the second. There are actually two memorandums of agreement here that cover 4 years. So let me just go. So consequently, there are two matrices, one for each MOA.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so yes, if they, I would be beyond amazed if a dispatcher stayed that long, honestly, but they would be at 2587 if they were a civilian dispatcher at step 12.
All right.
It would be my goal that we would have a whole department full of step 12s. That means we're not replacing. But as I stated earlier, the average tenure right now is 18 months, and most dispatchers aren't surpassing step 3 or 4. So we're hoping with this new contract, we have some longevity in that room, and you're correct about step 12, Counselor.
All right. And then, I don't know if this is part of the question, if I can ask this question. On this other part that I printed out, you get some of here, like you got animal control officer, you got a plumber, electrician, and we don't have none of those hired on this scale master and this metrics that you get.
I believe that you are into the next contract. Right now, this is just the dispatchers.
All right.
So the next one is the inspectors, and then we'll talk about those folks.
All right, okay, Andy, you can make your thing.
I
Thank you.
reinstate my motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve 13222. There are no objections. I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's approved. 13322, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the following personal services account, the sum of $13,078 to be charged again to credit to the following account, Airport Fund Personal Services.
This is also part of
Yep.
that contract, the dispatchers.
The dispatchers.
Yep. Oddly enough, I'm not really quite certain why, the airport line people are in this group, but at some point in the past, that's where they put them. And certainly with the airport, I will say, we have an extremely tough time hiring airport line people. It is very tough. I mean, we just hired a part-time person, and it took us 4 months. And so, really tough. So this certainly will definitely help. And again, we looked at, other airports, to see if they made sense in terms of the, demographics of the community or whatever. But, this is, again, they work hard, and I will say, I think that the airport certainly brings a lot into the area, and these folks are the ones that are fueling the planes, servicing and helping the, pilots when they come in, and they're getting their dinner and, all kinds of things, try to coordinate that customer-centric aspect, which is part of this position. So in any case, that is what this is part of. I think this brings us a little bit more comparable.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one question for Ms. Davis. When, as an employee that comes off the street, as a person that comes off the street, and I mean, what kind of, you say you have a hard time to fill this position, what kind of qualifications do you actually need for that to do? Because I thought an airport person was cutting the grass and maintaining some of the, not full scope of it, but
Right.
some of it.
You are right. They are, doing grass cutting, cutting grass, cutting vegetation back, but they also have to go and be certified to fuel jets, or any of these planes that come in. And that certainly can be a dangerous task. In addition, they take care of any of the, any people that come into the airport, that either are using the space. They also deal with all the FAA people. They're doing a lot of handiwork on, handyman type of small construction things on the hangars. I don't know how many hangars are there, I apologize, but they do a lot of that. They are up on those hangars if they have to replace or do any work on the doors, the doors that roll. These guys are doing that.
Then my question to you is, if you're telling me and you're telling this council that we're having a hard time to find people for the position, then why do we have a step 1 to 5? Why don't we just start them off at a step 5 and up? I mean, if you're having a hard time to fill the position, I wouldn't want to, if you're saying it's that much of a job at $20 an hour, and I can go to McDonald's and flip burgers for $20.50, common sense, I'm going to go with a 50 cents higher.
As long as we can, and what dictates that is where the other airport line people are placed within this matrix. So, there are stipulations that I would need to, we would need to hire somebody, typically no higher than somebody already employed in that same position. Then you look at how long that person, the current employee has been here, but this will definitely this will definitely help. in terms of getting somebody in. You know, we've also adjusted, you know, the head airport line person as well, because before there wasn't any difference between the rates with the airport line person and the head airport line person. It made no sense. If you're supervising somebody, you should be paid more. So we did put, like I said, certainly a lot of research into this, as well as looking into what makes sense. But we will. I mean, now this matrix, because we did so much work on it, that will give us the opportunity to bring somebody in higher.
All right, you can make the motion, Andy.
They also plow snow as well. They take care of the runways. There's a lot.
They're essentially, I mean, I think of it like the cemetery or the parks crew, the cemetery crews. I used to work for them.
Yeah.
They're the caretakers of the airport, the
Yep.
caretakers of the cemetery. They do everything and anything involving the airport, just like, for example, our cemetery personnel do everything and anything involving the cemeteries. That's what their function is.
Make a motion to approve 13322.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 13322. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent.
It breaks my heart, but I'll have to go, yeah.
Seeing no objection, it is approved. 13422, in order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $122,128 to be charged against available funds and credited to the following accounts: Facilities, Personal Services, $3,032; Police Personal Services, $3,604; Building Personal Services, $42,487; Health Personal Services, $47,689; Council on Aging Personal Services, $10,128; Library Personal Services, $12,999; and Employee Benefits, Other Benefits, $2,189. Ms. Davis.
So this is the Service Employees International Union, the SEIU, Local 888, which is the inspectors group. And you can see on the matrix, as Councilor Boschman had mentioned already, the positions that are in here, basically comprised of the building inspectors, health inspectors, the nurses, the custodians, the food and milk inspector, as well as the wire inspector and plumbing inspector. So with this particular group, we had done, if you recall, that in the last contract cycle, we needed to bring up the wages of the building inspectors, as well as the health inspectors, because we're having a tough time hiring people. Happy to say, we've certainly done much better with that. And I think we are, in some cases, a little above other communities, but that last contract brought those folks in line. This time, we did move the plumbing inspector and the wire inspector up a grade. And we also did that with the public health nurse as well, and the custodians we did. The animal control officer, I know, Counselor, you had mentioned that needs to remain on this matrix, but we do not have an animal control officer that is a union person. We used to, but because this union owns this position, essentially, it needs to stay on this matrix.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, in the event that we don't have a private service, which I'm sure would be up to a joint decision between the chief and the mayor, then we would have this in place for, the only other option is a public
Correct.
employee. So just because we don't have positions in the budget, full-time positions in the budget for some of these matrix tables, doesn't mean we don't get rid of that position from the table. Nothing happens, it's just there. In the event that we end up hiring someone or changing course, like in the instance of an animal control officer and going from private back to public. Or private to full-time, they're both public expenses, but Yes,
Give you
Chief.
some
Yep,
I'd like
yep.
to just give you some historical facts on specifically animal control position. As you're well aware, the animal control position is a contracted service that runs under my department through my budget. It's something we did approximately 5 years ago. When I first looked in moving in the direction of contracted services, we had to negotiate with this union because that was a union position. And one of the items that we talked about was we were going to bring in contracted services, but the union at that time wanted that position to remain on the matrix in case contracted services ever failed. Obviously, it's worked well for the city of Fitchburg the last 6 years, contracted services for animal control. But the reason that remains on there is that was part of negotiations 2 contracts ago, and it will remain there as long as we have contracted services. I don't see us ever going back the other direction, but that's why it's on there, Counselor.
All right. Well, I get some other questions from Ms. Davis on this, if the chair doesn't mind. My questions to you, as you're probably going to be sitting here most of the night, you're going to be listening to some of the departments come in front of us. We're farming out a job that's costing the city over $100,000 for lights and all that. Do you see the city for going to hire an electrician anytime soon, instead of us subcontracting that job out, and then we're at the mercy of the contractor, and some of the lights don't get put on for approximately a year, maybe longer? Whereas an electrician, you can use them in any part of the city. You got to have wiring in here to be moved. You got different parts of the city that.
Counselor, I don't know if Ms. Davis is the right person to ask that question of. That decision as to whether we would go from private back to full-time, in the instance of streetlights, for example, that's under Commissioner Erickson's group. I believe that it would be a joint decision between he and the mayor as to if they want to get off the private contractor and hire full-time electricians. That's not something she can answer. She would be the repository. They would then send to her a requisition to put out a rec to hire electricians. So that's not something she can answer. That would be more a question for the commissioner or the mayor in terms of if we were to go from privatization to full-time hire. And if we go to full-time hire, then she would kick off the hiring process. So.
All right, now let me ask you a question. I'll wait for the commissioner to come up. But my question to you, if I ask that question to the commissioner, can we also get a breakdown of what it's costing us for an electrical guy to come into this city to do work
Well,
as a subcontractor?
This petition, this order is to fund
I understand that.
contractual agreement with
Right.
with the union. We don't have any electricians on staff that
Right.
do those kinds of jobs, so it's a moot point with respect to this order.
All right. All right.
That would
Sorry.
be more an appropriate question to me for a budget meeting. When Commissioner Erickson's before, or when the mayor and his staff go to the DPW page where the streetlight account is, lock it, that'd be the appropriate time, in my opinion, to ask those kinds of questions.
All right,
So,
sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. Thank you.
Go ahead. I'll
Make a
wait.
motion to approve 13422.
I'll second that one.
motion made and seconded to approve 13422. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
11722, in order that there be and hereby is transferred from within, the sum of $35,000 send be transferred from fire personal services incentives and credited to fire personal services overtime. We have a letter here from the mayor that's dated today, councilors, that was handed to me. Dear Honorable City Council, please be advised that Fire Chief Suarez has requested an increase in the transfer amount of $35,000 from $35,000 to $55,000. I agree with this additional amount and therefore respectfully request that you amend Order 11712 from $35,000 to $55,000. And that was a letter from the mayor today. So I would ask for a motion to amend.
I'll make a motion to
Order.
amend the order.
Motion made and seconded to amend 11722 to reflect $55,000 instead of $35,000. Same accounts, interdepartmental accounts would reflect the transfer. If there are no objections on the amendment, I will take it under unanimous consent. Seeing none, 11722 is before you as amended. Chief Suarez, would you like to make any statements?
Good evening, councilors, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for accepting the amendment. So the reasons for the initial and the amended balance increase is to balance our OT line item due to many factors. Some of these, we had 45 COVID cases since October. Majority of those were during the 10-day quarantine period. So we'd have to obviously hire overtime for that. We had 8 multiple alarm fires in the last few months. We had a few long-term absences. One of our deputies was activated by the National Guard due to COVID, so he could assist the local hospitals. We're 1 firefighter short since March due to retirement. We're in the process now of hiring that firefighter. And 5 firefighters that were lost due to the academy, so that's 5 firefighters that we had out for approximately 3 months each. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
You're saying, how many
Councilor
people,
Boishman.
how many people did you say had COVID in your department?
About 45.
45 people had COVID in your department?
That's correct.
And how many people are vaccinated?
And how many people won?
Are vaccinated with shots?
We're pretty highly vaccinated. I think we're above 80%, maybe about 85%. Could be even higher.
All right. Because that's the first time I've ever seen, I don't know about you, Mr. Chair, but just since I've been on this council, I've never seen any of the chiefs come in front of us to transfer funds. I don't know if you remember that.
Well, if I may, it's similar to Chief Martineau's request 2 weeks ago, where he made the statement that, you know, it's been 8 years that he's been chief, and he's never had to come before us for a supplemental until now. And there was a whole host of factors that were not of the norm in his normal operations that triggered his need to ask for the additional overtime funds. In Chief Suarez's case, with his explanation, again, a lot of factors at play that we don't normally experience with respect to COVID, and then personnel going into the military to assist with the pandemic, but also more frequently the fire department has these requests for similar reasons to the chief and police, although usually he can absorb it. But what I'm trying to say is, for police and fire overtime issues, other than COVID and anything related to COVID, which is an outlier, which this is a contributing factor to, as he said, you know, when these guys go into the academy, you know, they're there for months, requires the full-time staff to pick up the pace while they're bringing these guys onto the force. So, and I would also suspect too, and I'm not speaking for you, but I'm just thinking out loud that, you know, this year you guys have had a lot more than normal multi-structured fires too.
That's correct.
So, again, whether it's the police or the fire department, there are so many mitigating factors that come into play for why they may need more overtime. And it's typically due to personnel shortages due to a whole host of reasons that are not because they're not budgeted. It's just the people they have on staff are either gets ill, hurt, more calls than normal, people pulled off the front line for other reasons like the pandemic. So that I have not seen a pandemic-related overtime request, but we've never had one like this before. So it
I
makes
haven't
sense to
either.
me.
All right.
Yeah.
And if I may add that this increase too, so is for overtime, but that number will be saved in other line items, such as the firefighters line item, due to the shortage that we had with the person hasn't been hired yet, and things like that, so. all that money
And
will
this
be-
is a budget transfer. This is not coming out of
It's
available
not a
funds.
request, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say, if nobody's got any questions, I'll make a motion that we accept. If nobody's got any questions.
Second?
I have a motion made and seconded to approve 11722 as amended. Seeing no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's accepted.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
11922, order that there be and hereby is transferred from within.
You got 118 first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped 118. Thank you. 11822, order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $12,100 $86 sent to be transferred from Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 purchase of PPE and credited to Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 food insecurity assistance. We have Director of Community Development Skorsky before us.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, while we're at the COVID-19, why can't we take 118, 119, 120?
We certainly can if the committee wishes to. Is that okay with the committee? Okay, so we'll take 118.22 through 120.22 together. So I read 118, 119.22 is an order of $44,468 to be transferred from Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 support for students, $40,000, and Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 purchase of PPE, $4,468, and credited to Community Development Block Grant COVID-19 business assistance. And then 120.22 is transferring $45,000 from COVID-19 block grant funding support for students and homelessness services to homeowner and renter assistance. Mr. Skorsky.
Good evening, councilors. So these three transfer requests stem from our CDBG CARES Act allocations. We received two in 2020. And we are sort of nearing the finish line with our CDBG CARES Act allocation that we received, and we are looking at areas where we didn't see spending and trying to allocate those remaining funds towards projects that there still is a COVID tieback that we can then go to HUD and say, we want to support this programming to support this COVID impact, because there will be a point in the near future where if we can't show a clear tieback, they'll ask us to give the monies back. And I'll go through each of them, starting with what we're transferring from and why we transferred from that line item. There is a sum of money that we're transferring away from PPE, frankly, because we've got quite a bit of it at this point. We've distributed almost all of what we have as a department, but of course the Board of Health, through its various resources, has a surfeit of PPE, and you know, we're also kind of moving past the stage of mandatory mask mandates and all that, present company excluded, I guess. Then the other item, the bulk of the transfer was related to what was called student supports, but was really allocated to an original project with the Boys and Girls Club to support remote learning. And so we basically developed kind of an initial project plan with them, and then all the students moved back into the classroom and moved back into the Boys and Girls Club, so there wasn't a need for remote learning in that same way. And frankly, $80,000 for a COVID tieback for schools and students really at this point would go towards capital projects, and those needs are far greater than $80,000 alone could meet. So of that amount, we basically cut in half of that going towards business supports to essentially support businesses with a new program to retool their business due to COVID impacts. So for example, there are a couple businesses that relied really heavily on nightlife and large events. Although that is currently allowed, not prohibited by the state like it once was, there's still a hesitancy, at least in some circles, which has caused that revenue line, to drop quite a bit for a few different businesses that kind of specialized in that. So this would allow those businesses to kind of retool their efforts towards something that might make them more competitive in today's climate. And then the other main item we are transferring into is rent support. And that's still a great need. We have two existing funds, one through MOC, which is still working through their initial allocation. The second, which is what this $45,000 would go towards, is the Spanish American Center. We gave them about $80,000 about a year ago, and they've burned right through it, and they still have a greater need, so this would go towards continuing that programming. And then the other item we are transferring into was $12,186 to the North Central Mass Faith-Based Community Coalition to support their food pantry operations. That's, again, another pre-existing program that we've supported through CARES Act funding. This is just giving some additional support to them, which they certainly need right now, given inflation and cost of purchasing food to keep this food pantry up and running. I think I covered all the items where monies were transferred from, with one exception, I guess. The rent support, 5,000 of that 45,000 went from homelessness services, which originally that went to support our father's house at the time, and so we felt like rent support would be the best next option to really support housing insecure people in the city. So we reprogrammed the money accordingly. I think that covers it. It's kind of complicated amongst the three items, but I'm happy to talk about any of them in more detail.
Essentially, Cliff Notes executive summary version, you have remaining COVID-19 grant funds for specific purposes initially allocated for that you've done a reassessment on. You don't have a need like we once had for those areas. And in order to spend down these funds before the government takes it back, you have found other needs within the guidelines of the grant that we could address even more so in relation to COVID-19. So you're just repurposing them, kind of like the development block grant money we get every year.
Right,
Yeah,
that's a
same
concise
concept.
summary of
Yeah.
my,
Councilor Boschman.
I don't know if I'm going to support your three moves here. That's why I put them together. Reason being, according to Channel 5 News and ABC Tonight World, they're all predicting that this COVID virus is going to get a lot worse come the fall. And they're predicting over a million people are going to be infected with the COVID virus. This new strain coming out. Now, I'm only going by what I see on TV and what the experts are saying to the American people. So for me to go back and say, take the funds out, because right now we don't need it, I think we're being short-sighted. I think we should wait to it. And plus that, what I don't understand is that some of these here, they get grants already, businesses that they can apply to the government, rental assistant, raft, and something else, that the government claims they haven't even used all their money that they have for people that can't afford the rent. So I would make a recommendation that we not support this at this present time. It can always come back in front of us, because according to the government, this virus is going to get a heck of a lot worse come the fall. And we don't know if the mask mandate's going to come back, which has already started to come back in different communities throughout the country. We don't know if they're going to shut down schools, because it's supposed to get a heck of a lot worse than what it's got now. And that's why I hesitate on those three moves. Nothing against you, Tom,
I know that.
but that's how I feel. I just want to hold off until we're sure that we're over the hump on this. Thank you.
Councilor Van Huysen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's important to consider that this money is still going to COVID-related programs. It's not being used for other things. These are still other COVID programs that we have. When we first got this allocation of funding, we had an idea of what the need was, but we were basically guessing about how much we were going to need to spend in each bucket. And after, a period of time, that we realized that, maybe we don't need all the money in one area, and we need more money in another area, so we moved it around. And that's the purpose of this. It's not to assume that the COVID pandemic is over or won't come back. It's basically looking at where we need the money within our efforts to fight the effects of the COVID pandemic. Thank you.
This is federal money, right?
Correct.
When is the deadline to spend these down?
I believe it's 2024 for this particular funding stream.
Okay.
But we also have to undergo continuous monitoring with HUD, where they're sort of reviewing what they want to see evidence of continued spend down. And frankly, if we're in a situation a year from now where the need is that great, schools are closed. This amount's going to be a drop in the bucket to meet the need of what we would really, what the situation would call for, I guess I would say. And what I can tell you right now is there are businesses that still have significant need today. There are families that have significant needs with rent today, especially considering inflation, and there are people that need to eat. And I think all three of those programs together are certainly a pressing need that we do need to meet today, and I certainly don't think we're out of the woods yet. But if we find ourselves in that position a year from now, we're going to need to really think big here. And I don't think this amount alone would help really put a dent in any of, the situations that you're alluding to. And again, with the mask and the PPEs and all that, it's also, again, that the Board of Health has done a really good job of amassing supplies that I don't think CDBG is really the best resource to help meet that need at this point.
I would hope that our health agencies at the state, federal, and local level got wiser after this pandemic, that they have a stockpile of those things now. Because when the pandemic started, there was no stockpile. I mean, you can play Monday morning quarterback and say that we got caught unaware, but, there's always, this should be a lesson that we should be well prepared for those events in the event that they happen. So I think we've gotten wiser from that point, so I would agree with your assessment on that. I also agree with you about the amount. We were talking millions of dollars in assistance. This is a drop in the bucket. We're talking barely $100,000. But I also am pleased with the fact that we are repurposing it to business assistance and renters assistance, because a lot of people lost their jobs because of this, have still not recovered financially from the loss of income, and most importantly, our small business community. A lot of them were forced to shut down through no fault of their own, not their decision, and so any assistance we can give them is paramount to upholding our commercial base in this city. So I'm in favor of this, and while I understand the concerns of my colleague, I don't want to make a decision now based on speculation, because there have been many instances where the government and these agencies have said one thing and then the opposite happens. I know they want to be more prepared by making everyone get focused on it, but I think we need to, we have the money now. The government doesn't want us sitting on this money. And as Councilor Van Huizinga said, it's being repurposed within the family of COVID-19 need. And the other issues that were addressed are going to be a much larger scale need than what we have remaining in these accounts. So we need to provide assistance to these folks now, and that their assistance is required. Our assistance to them is required whether something happens in 5 months or not. So it doesn't change that fact. So let's just, let's address the need as it is right now, because it's not going to go away.
And one thing, if I could add to, because I believe it is a 2024 expiration of these funds, but I'm not certain. But what I am certain of is that the COVID-19 tieback to these monies, where HUD basically looks at the way we're spending and is ensuring that this spending is directly responding to a COVID response, a COVID impact, if you will. If we get to a point where, I hope in a year this isn't a problem. If we get to that point and we don't have direct COVID tiebacks, and HUD is much more stringent than other federal funds, kind of like ARPA, for example, where the tieback can be a bit more tenuous, shall we say. It's not the case with HUD. So if a year from now we're in the opposite position, we're faring much better, and we can't show any more direct tiebacks, we would have to give that money back, because we wouldn't be able to spend it in good conscience knowing we're going to be audited. So I'd rather be in a position now where we know there's a need, we're tying it directly back to an impact, than a position a year from now we don't have that and we have to give it away.
Council Boschman?
I understand what the council to my left said, and I understand what Tom's saying. Like he said, it's only a drop in the bucket if we have a pandemic. Well, if we feel that way, why are we taking money away from the homeless shelter, whereas these are individual people that basically are in a homeless shelter because, number one, they could have problems, not only abuse, substance abuse, but other problems. I would prefer that, because I go back to RAF and other programs out there for rental assistance. There's plenty of money out there for them already, but there isn't enough money for the single guy or single guy and a woman that happen because they have substance abuse or that problem. They're out on the streets sleeping. I'm not a fan of homelessness, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating, but why are we taking away something that we know that can help? And you got a guy like me that sits on his council every night, when you come in front of us, to complain about the homeless and how we're building it up to bring them in. I would prefer we don't take in that 120 and put it into rental assistance, because I'll go back, I hate to repeat myself, RAF is out there for these people that are having a hard time, even a homeowner. So why would you take a small bit of money, like $40,000 or $45,000, and throw it on rental assistance where you can only help 3 or 4 people, and you might be helping about 15 or 20 people on a homeless line?
So I guess one clarification on RAFT. There's a certification that we must make about duplication of funding for any recipients of our CDBG rental assistance. So they can only receive funding after they've received support through other federal programs like RAFT, and there still remains a gap. And again, MOC had a much larger allocation, so they're still working through theirs, but Spanish American Center blew through 80,000 pretty quickly. And so the need is still there, even after accounting for other federal programs. And that's because the cost of rent is rising exponentially, the cost of goods and services is rising exponentially, and as we sort of learned earlier this evening, the cost of wages really is not. And so there is a bit of a disconnect there, and families are struggling to make ends meet. So I wouldn't disagree with the point you made about homelessness services. I think the issue is how far could that $5,000 go in the grand scheme of things to create a new program. It just felt like it was a little more administratively burdensome than the impact we know we could make by putting that same $5,000 towards supporting a family's ability to pay their rent and keep a roof over their heads. But I don't disagree at all. It's a pressing issue that we need to look at other resources, which is certainly what we did with ARPA and what we'll do every year with CDBG with our normal program year to help make a dent in that very serious issue.
Go ahead, Andy, and make a motion, because I'm not going to accept this motion.
Make a motion to accept 11822 to 12022.
Second?
A motion has been made and seconded to accept 11822 through 12022. Since there is an objection raised to the motion, I will ask for a roll call vote. So, Councilor Cruz,
Yes.
Councilor Van Huizinga,
Yes.
Councilor Boschman,
No.
and I am a yes. It passes 3-1. Next, we go to 12122, an order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $50,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to community development, capital expenses, architectural engineering for design of a stage at Riverfront Park. Mr. Swirsky.
So we can't make any official announcements yet, but if you pay attention to the news, tomorrow there'll be a release that will go out about an award that we've received in partnership with Newview Communities, a $200,000 grant to support the construction of a stage at Riverfront Park. We're also having a pending earmark from Representative Kuchmarek to also go towards this project, and a gift from the Friends of Riverfront Park. All of that will, kind of go towards the construction end. One of the local matches required is to put in design funding to make the project happen. So that's the request you have in front of you tonight. The Riverfront Park stage has always been part of the plans of the park since it was developed in 2003. I think it was value engineered out because we're in the middle of a recession. Building a park, it got costly. A further iteration came out in like 2011, 2012. Nothing ever came of it. And now we've got a rare opportunity to actually get this done. And this stage was always intended to be the park was always intended to be the events park for the city. Having an events park without a venue for the events, doesn't quite adequately meet the needs of our park system. So this funding would go towards the designs, which we would begin as soon as we receive the funding, so we can get everything in order to get the stage built with a goal of an April 2023 build with the grant funding from this grantor whose name shall remain nameless until tomorrow's announcement.
So I remember when we took ownership of the Riverfront Park from the FRA, when I was on the council in '08, you mentioned 11 and 12. During that time, the design issues were coming up again with the stage. Always wanted to put a stage there. As long as I've been on the council, it's always been talked about as a component of that park. In 2011, 2012, we did not go forward with the design because we were still in that recessionary period of coming back up. It took the city a good 5 or 6 years to get us out of that massive hit that happened in '08. So we weren't even entertaining something of that nature when all of our departments were short-staffed. So the timing makes sense today, and it's been 20 years in the making, that there's always been a component of that park that warranted a stage. And I think it just fits nicely with the Cushing development and the Mill Street development tying into the downtown transformation, that we're now going to have a staging area that I kind of hope we can, as a city, collect revenue from if we have performances there that are city-sponsored or not city-sponsored. But I'm looking at that stage, once it's finished, as a revenue generator for the city. City-owned parks, we have our own performances, fine, but I'm probably going ahead of myself here with this, but I see it as an opportunity, because it could be a real draw to the area to have a stage like that, in a park like that, right along the water. So it just makes sense to me that we have one. The only concern I have about this is, while the funding is in place for constructing the facility, and if the council approves this request to design the facility, it's more of a reality next year than not. The question then becomes the maintenance. And I don't believe I'm ahead in asking these questions, because like accepting a grant for hiring personnel or accepting grants to build a new park, it's the same aspect here. We have the money to do it, but short of the maintenance of cutting the grass, which we already are doing, I'm worried about the structure, the maintenance of the structure. If there's graffiti, security of that structure. If there's vandalism, something gets damaged, or wear and tear. Over time, it wears down. Has there been any thoughts about that? Because I've had some constituents since 2012 raise concerns about, if there is a stage there, how are we going to address things that may happen, like vandalism, damage to it, and then the long-term maintenance of it. So
I think, to your earlier point about charging a fee for use of the stage, I guess I see it as a revenue producer in some respects, but what I would hope would be for that revenue to actually be funneled back into the maintenance of the park.
Yeah.
And certainly
that's what I'm talking about.
Right. I assume.
Yeah.
The Friends of Riverfront Park, who will be providing a donation to help support the design, they've been able to keep a steady stream of funding to keep, and I'm actually pretty ignorant on the sources of the funding, but they do development and fundraising to continue to have sources of funding available for the maintenance of the park, and I think this could provide a steady stream for them to continue that and hopefully increase the maintenance of the park and the stage accordingly. And I think, if you talk about major events like the Brewers Festival, they pay over $1,000 to just bring in a temporary stage. If, we could get half that just for cost of using the stage, I think using that for larger events could build into the sustainability there.
Is there any discussion involving the design work that involves what I said about any aspects involving security? I know it's a public park, it's open, but, I mean,
I'm looking behind me,
When we put a structure
yeah.
like that in a public park, like any of our structures that we have on public lands, they could get damaged, they could get, I mean, it's just a normal part of life, I guess, but I just want to have some idea if we're prepared at all for that, or, I mean, kind of hard when it's an open space.
Right.
So-
I mean, I think there have been discussions about cameras as a security device in that park as well as other
Okay.
areas, but that could be one solution that we could look at, certainly.
That would be a good one. So, just my take. Thank you. Council Van Hazinga?
I was wondering if you could just describe what the concept for the stage will be. Like, will it just be an open pedestal? Will it be covered? Will it include bathrooms? And I know a lot of this will be worked out in the engineering, but what do you envision that what the space will be like?
Thanks for asking. So, you know, I think the ultimate goal of the stage, it's gone in various iterations and had some of these elements and others not along the design process. But the goal would be to have dressing rooms and/or bathroom. And, you know, certainly I've heard the stories during Civic Days of Elvis impersonators having to put on their Elvis costume in their car because they didn't want to drive all the way from Worcester in an Elvis suit. You know, I think if we do aspire to be a park in a space that has large-scale events, people need to get changed, and of course, the restrooms are a big use there as well. That also drives up the cost of the project, you know, given the water and wastewater needs that would require. But I think that is an aspiration that we have for the park that we'd look to seek through the design phase if we could fulfill. And it would, you know, be a covered pavilion, at least for the stage area, and then various iterations have had sort of either built-in seating or kind of landscape style environment that could be used as bench seating. But I think that would all get drawn out in the design phase as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Council Bushman?
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
My question to you, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I'm going to be point blank in what I want to say. I don't understand your department's thinking of where we're headed. And the reason why I say that, if you knew all along that we were going to put a stage, that you wanted a stage on Riverside Park, and then why, and our goal is to develop the downtown Main Street into apartments. That's the goal, because we had meetings already. We changed some of the zoning for that reason. So, I talked to you before, and I asked you, because I read it again, and I wanted to make sure I know what I'm talking about when I'm reading it up on how to bring back Main Streets. And they look for it's called, you probably pronounce the word better than me, a procession mall where people can hang out. And, you know, you would have had that whole section of Boulder Drive, that whole section right up to the park, where you could have had, as you see on Main Street going on right now, most of your restaurants are on your left-hand side as you drive up. That right now that I see, most of the restaurants are on the left-hand side. Left side as you're driving on Main Street.
The north
They
side.
could have walked right in the back, had tables in the back, could have had entertainment at Riverside Park, cross the street with no problem, and have a playground right there for people, and even build up your downtown with commercial space for retail shops. Now you're telling me you want to put a stage up there, still have the road going down, still have parking, and have people cross the street on it's going to be a busy street. Because we're making it, you're trying to avert traffic from Main Street to Boulder Drive for a shortcut, because you don't want Main Street to be a destination place. You want it to be a destination, not a go-through. And I don't understand the logic. I don't understand it. I'm trying to figure it out. Where you had me go to school, and I think, Andy, you were there, right? That Smart Grow program? Mm-hmm. And they showed right there how it worked. They had a big design, and I said, oh, that could work right here in downtown Fab. You were there, because we talked about it. Right downtown. And I don't understand your logic. I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't know where we're going. One minute you want over here to develop, but still you want a major corridor going down through your park. I'm not trying to second guess you. You got the education, I'm just an average guy. But I don't understand the logic. I'm trying to figure it out.
So I think I agree with you that we are not accomplishing the entire vision of what we'd like to see with this project on Boulder Drive. And I think we will both like to see Boulder Drive become more of a connector between Main Street and the river.
Right.
But we also can't do it overnight. And, you know, the folks who came before me that developed Riverfront Park, you know, that was on the site of I think a rubber factory that burned down.
Right.
Serious brownfield issues, you know, over millions of dollars of remediation needed. They did their step to redevelop that park. Now I'm doing mine to put the stage there to finalize that project. Along with their plans for the park, they had plans to create green space all along the southern edge of Boulder Drive. That didn't get fulfilled because we were in the midst of a recession. But it also didn't get fulfilled because we have a really complicated roadway scheme between Boulder Drive and Main Street. The efforts we have underway to convert both of those to two-way and to not just create a bypass, but to create pedestrian-friendly interactions on both streets and to slow down traffic on both streets will help us get to a point where folks can feel more ownership over the Boulder Drive area and feel better connected between downtown and the river. This is not going to be the silver bullet that solves for that issue, nor is the main Boulder project, but we're taking incremental steps to get there because we don't have a blank check. If I had a blank check, I would do all the things that you're asking because I think they're the right things, and I think we need to connect with the river. We need to create more green space. We need to have the businesses on Main Street communicate with the river and the park there and to create that interactivity between these two nodes. But we don't have that today, and we're working towards it. We're just working a little bit slower than I think you and I would like.
Okay. I'll support your plan, Tom. Well, I'm not going to make the motion because you guys want to talk too. But I want to ask you one other question while we're here and while we're talking about the park. Are you going to make, one of your proposals, make like a little playground? Because if you're planning on redeveloping all this upstairs of these apartments, people get kids, and they're going to want to come out their back door and go to a little park and play in a sandbox or on the swings. Is that part of the plan in the future?
So I think a park downtown for a playground for kids is a fantastic idea. And I think if we really want to aspire to our economic development strategic plan's goal of making downtown a more family-friendly place, I'm on board. I know we've also raised concerns in the past of maintenance of new DPW assets, and you know, that's certainly an issue that I would flag as we're considering something like that. But we do need more facilities that are appropriate for children in the downtown. We don't have enough of them. I don't think Riverfront Park's the right place for it because I don't think we have the space, especially if we want it to be an event space. We want to create that space that's sort of more open and available for programming. But, you know, you take your pick downtown. If you see a spot that you think would be a good fit for a park and, you know, we find some resources to make it happen and the council supports it, I'm all in favor of it. Certainly some caveats and considerations we need to make, though.
All right. Go ahead, Andy, because you're going to make it anyway.
I have Councilor Cruz first.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, when I first saw this order for $50,000 on the stage, I thought, well, what the heck? It's just going to be a small stage, and nobody's going to use it, and it's going to have graffiti all over it, and maybe it's not such a great idea. But after hearing you, Mr. Skorsky, speak about the grant that Eeview community is about to accept, as well as Rep. Krishmerik's earmark for something much larger and bigger scale, I'm all for it. I enjoy to support the work of community development because I think you're an asset to Fitchburg, and if this is the right decision and the park is going to get some complete and the stage is going to get follow through like we've been seeing in recent years with the city and with your department of doing everything even if we don't have a blank check, of always doing everything to the best of our ability and not halfway, that I'm all for supporting this, 50,000, obviously, it's not a small amount of money, but in the grand scheme, I'm happy to support this allocation so that we can have a bigger, inclusive and wonderful park and continue to see the growth of downtown. That's all. I yield the floor. Thank you.
Councilman Hasegawa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this quick, and I think the downtown is exceptionally important to the city, and we need a lot of careful planning as we shepherd the redevelopment of this area. And we should absolutely take those smart growth principles that we learned about, and I'll commend you, Counselor, for listening and paying attention and keeping those in mind as we make these decisions. But I think there is a difference, like Mrs. Skrowski said, that when you're planning a brand new city on a grid, you can do everything you possibly want to do. But you know what? We're already in the middle of a game, and we already have cards in our hand, and we got to play them too. That the geography of this city does limit traffic with the river, with the hills, and there are only so many ways the traffic can go through choke points, and we have to work around that sometimes. And would it be nice to have the Main Street properties connected directly to the river without anything between? Absolutely it would be. But we do have realities that we have to work around, that we have to deal with, and we can't do everything that might be perfect in that smart growth mindset because we have other considerations. People still have to get from West Fitchburg to East Fitchburg and vice versa. So I think this is a great idea, the stage in the development of Riverfront Park as an attraction space, because what we need really downtown is people. We need people, like you mentioned with our incentives for housing downtown. We need people but we also need people coming to downtown to have fun. And this is a way to have events that gets people downtown to support businesses, to just have a community and an environment that makes the downtown lived in, that makes it a place where things are happening, where people have fun, where people, bring their families and then come back at later time. So I think this is a step in the right direction in that smart growth mindset. Would it be perfect if we could start with a blank page? Probably not. But I think this is building on the assets we have available, and I think it's a good step to support that amenity downtown. And I will make a motion to approve 12122.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 12122. Just speaking on that, a lot of what we're discussing was theory 15, 20 years ago. The reason why I always sound so optimistic is not because I'm a pom-pom waver, but I remember what this downtown and this city's position was 15 years ago. The fact that I'm just envisioning it in my head with the theater block renovations and having an actual production stage theater, one of the few in the region, in the state, mind you, and having a performance center down on Riverfront Park, and then the art museum. I'm just thinking in terms of things for people to do downtown, drawing people from outside. The visions are becoming reality bit by bit. To have that stage there and in working order and draw events, to have the theater block when it's finished in a couple of years, to have the museum up the street, it ties in that whole arts and culture theme, but it gives people reasons to come down here. It will draw more business, it will draw more people to live here. And perhaps I am optimistic, but I guess I am because 15 years ago, we were talking about shutting the library down half the time and shutting streetlights off. We've come such a long way since then that historical perspective I have sitting in this chair, just the visions we talked about for 20 years are finally coming to fruition bit by bit. So it's very exciting. The only thing I wanted to mention also is we're contributing $50,000. There are multiple funding sources that are paying for this construction. So, kudos to those organizations for securing the funds or giving us the funds, the Community Development Office for securing the funds. It sounds like when all is said and done, this is probably going to be north of a $300,000 effort.
And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that.
We have a motion on the floor, Mr. Soares, but it's going to be north of a $300,000 effort that we're only contributing $50,000 to start. So I hope this committee or the council will be able to see the final design work and see, and again, market this thing. that we're doing it, that it's done. Let's get some events down here. Let's go, let's kick this thing off and let's see what happens. So I'm excited about it, and it's definitely a step in the right direction. So I have a motion made and seconded to approve 12122. Speaking on the motion, Council Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, real quick, because I know that I have some constituents watching who ask me and tell me don't just push everything through, and ask me why we don't spend certain, like $50,000 on other things that they would like to see it get spent on, because I know they're watching, because they warn me that they're watching. So to you guys who are watching, just like Councilor Di Natale said, this is very much money to leverage other funding sources that aren't taxpayer funded. This is the stuff this is opportunities that are provided to us by the state and federal government to reshape our downtown, to reshape our community and our city. And so while this $50,000, as wonderful and as much as you would like to spend it on these things that you'd like to see it spent on, the opportunities to spend the money and turn it into 300,000 or more or millions are few and far between. And this is sort of the direction that these are the opportunities that we have to make the most of our money, and that's why I like to approve these things, because I see it's us making the most of our money. Thank you. I yield the floor.
I have a motion made, Council Boschman?
Just one thing, I'm not gonna go on long. I'm not against having people go downtown. I'm always bugging him about what I read and ask questions, so I just wanna make that clear. I'm all in favor, if it's gonna bring people downtown, and get it back to the days when I was a kid, where you were bumping into people on Main Street. Let's do it. That's it, go ahead. I won't fight this.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12122. If there are no objections, I'll take this as unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. 12222, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $150,000, same to be charged against available funds and credited community development capital expenses construction for construction of the Oliver Street parking lot, and this would be the former location of the Central Fire Station.
Correct.
Mr. Skorsky.
So in 2017, the Central Fire Station was demolished. Shortly thereafter, DPW put together site plans that were approved by the Planning Board to create a parking lot for 25 spaces. For a variety of reasons, those plans have not come to fruition, but the time's right now. We've got, because of the main Boulder project, we're going to lose 6 parking spaces on Oliver Street. This will create a net gain still of 19 parking spaces for that adjacent area. We're about to implement the new license plate recognition technology mounted on vehicles, which will allow for a more streamlined enforcement of our existing parking supply. And then finally, as the property committee and then the council approved just a few months ago, 491 Main Street is soon to be on the market, and it will be, I think, in our best interest to sell that property with the promise of parking directly adjacent to it, along with that RFP package. So all those elements kind of coming together, I think, lead to a good moment to finally get this project done and create more parking in that area.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hole right now. There's nothing there. And I've had constituents in that neighborhood, first thing they ask me about it is, that could be a great place for parking. And so when I saw this, I personally thought this was a no-brainer for the use of that space, in alignment with a lot of constituent wishes in that area, that look at that space and it's not being utilized. This would certainly alleviate some parking concerns and create a net gain in that respect. Councilor Boschman?
$150,000, you read a thing, that comes up to about $6,000 a unit, right? Am I correct? Approximately $6,000 a unit, I mean, a parking space, sorry. What's the, are we gonna rent it out, those parking spaces?
So it's an ongoing conversation with our city treasurer and parking clerk, but it'll look something like some of our other surface lots, which are a mix of time-limited parking and permit parking. But one could see, depending on the proposal we get back for 491 Main Street, an environment where that could just be solely permit parking. It's still an ongoing discussion, but it could be any of those
Now,
iterations.
and my next question to you is that, we'll go back to the previous petition, too. Have you ever thought about a land swap where you're thinking about fixing the Riverside Park, and you got parking lots there, and you got a free parking lot here? You'll have an abutter already there, you won't have to pay any money if you're right there, it'll be ours on a land swap.
That's a great question. So the gentleman who purchased the former Shacks in the Gallery Sitka space a few years back, he bought it for the purpose of having the parking lot on Boulder Drive next to Riverfront Park. He bought it to have that parking lot for his building, which is across the street on Main Street, which is that whole block of Main and
Right.
Oliver. So when I learned of that, I actually entertained, I brokered a swap, shall we say, between the Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority and that property owner in the event that the city were to transfer that property into the hands of the Redevelopment Authority. The property owner was interested, ultimately decided not to, just given some issues he was having with his tenancies on his properties. It was right before the pandemic. But I do think this is something that would be interesting to entertain after we get the parking lot done, frankly. It might be a more attractive asset. And I think it'd be well worth it. Both of them are about of equal size, but one's right next to the river. And certainly of more importance for us, given its proximity to Riverfront Park.
Right. I'm going to support this, council, so whoever makes the motion, I'll support it, but I just want to say one thing. I don't want to see us give the parking spaces away. I don't think $30 a month or $30 a month is sufficient if you're going to park there 24/7. I really don't think it's sufficient, especially if we're investing $150,000 in it. As we say, if you say the neighbors want to rent the spaces there, and they want to park right there because they live on whatever street those are, Andy, on your ward, I don't know the name of the street, Wallace Ave or somewhere like that, and they want to walk that far. I don't think $30 is sufficient. I think you ought to really look at it and start making it fair so we can start recouping some of our money back on some of these parking deals, because according to your report and the study we had, there's plenty of parking downtown. That was the report, all in walking distance. So we're just adding more parking spaces, and we're hoping for people to come. So if we lease them out, I'm hoping we go higher than 30, because I was talking to Ann today about it. That's one of the questions I asked her. So I'll support it. If they're going to lease it out, I'd like to see an increase in the parking there.
Council Van Haska?
Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe part of the parking plan included a re-examination of our current rates in regards to monthly parking and on-street parking, things like that. So I believe that is something that will be considered, and we can always adapt those prices as we move forward. But I do think an important part of this project that Tom mentioned is really supporting larger redevelopment. That the parking lot itself is not as, in the availability of parking in that site, is not as important as it allowing for the redevelopment of a problem property that's much larger, that's been vacant for such a long time. That those buildings between Main and Elm Street along Oliver are really an eyesore in downtown, and they're some of the toughest buildings to get a viable redevelopment there. And the city does control them. We have them out in an RFP process right now. So if we can leverage other assets the city have to make a development more feasible in that location and make it a better development, that's absolutely something we should consider. That it's not just about the parking spaces, it's about what we can use those parking spaces to do to support other projects in downtown, to get more development and investment in downtown. So I think that's one of the great assets we have and one of the great opportunities we have in downtown.
Mr. Chair, I just want to tell him, I'm not against it, don't get me wrong, Andy, in your ward, but I just want to point out, too, right across the street from 491 is the in-town garage. The garage right across the street, right on the corner of Putnam and Boulder Drive. It's an extra 50 feet to walk, so I understand what you're saying. But I want him to keep in mind that if we develop this and we're looking at the future for Riverside Park, there could be a swap. And I think that should be a priority of yours, because I'm not going to be on the council forever. So, and that's what he should be thinking about it.
Oh, and I agree, if the property owner would entertain it, it's in our best interest to do so.
I think we could make him if you talk sweet enough.
I've tried.
All right, go ahead, Andy, make your motion. Oh, he wants to talk.
Make a motion to approve 12222.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12222. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's
Thank you all.
approved. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
12322, in order that there be and hereby is transferred the sum of $58,000 to be charged against reserve for snow and ice removal and credited to the following Department of Public Works snow and ice accounts. Salt, $58,000. Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Chairman DiNatale. So this request is to basically close out our snow and ice account for the fiscal year '22. And basically, this covers the most recent purchase of salt that we made towards the end of the winter. And once this is moved, the accounts will be closed out until next year.
Council Boschman.
On the, how do we look for salt for started for next year's season? Is the warehouse full, right to the top?
I don't believe it's completely full. I think it's, I'd say 60%. So
Are we going to shoot to get 100% of it full? Because last year we ran, if I'm not mistaken, we ran out of salt, didn't we?
we did run out of salt towards the beginning of the year. We got hit with a couple of ice storms early on. So we could look at ordering more at the early part of next season. But the goal here would be to close this out for the remainder of FY22 and then look forward to FY23 for stocking up before we get hit with our first winter event of next year.
All right, go ahead, Andy. Make a motion.
Make a motion to approve 12322.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 12322. There are no objections. I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. 12422, order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $100,000 to be charged against the reserve for snow and ice removal and credited to DPW streetlights expenses, streetlight maintenance.
So I'd just like to read the request letter that I sent to the mayor. It kind of explains everything that we're potentially utilizing this money for. So the Department of Public Works respectfully requests approval of the mayor and city council for the appropriation of $100,000 from available funds to supplement our existing streetlight repair budget and to help with the removal and replacement of old, failing concrete light poles and bases throughout the Main Street, Upper Common, and adjoining side streets leading to Pritchard Street and Elm Street. Over the last year, we've seen a dramatic increase in streetlight outages, rising labor and materials costs, and limited availability of parts. The requested funds will help us accomplish the following: catch up on existing backlog of various outages throughout the city, help offset the increased cost of labor and materials, help replenish our existing stock of parts for repair, remove and replace old failing concrete poles that present a major safety issue for motorists and pedestrians, and replace 13 concrete light poles and bases that have previously been removed due to safety concerns. We truly appreciate the assistance and support of the mayor and city council in this effort to improve the city's street lighting and meet our city's safety needs. I'd just like to add that we're in the process of contracting with a firm to repair our streetlights. I actually signed our contract today. We've gone through the bid process, and I believe there are a few other signatures that we still need to get before the contract is finalized and executed. But between this contract and our previous 3-year on-call, we've seen a roughly 30% increase in labor costs and 20 to 25% increase in materials costs. So this $100,000 will supplement what's included in our annual budget to repair streetlights throughout the city.
Councilor Boschman.
Mr. Commissioner, Nick, are you going to put this on a line item this year in the budget? I don't think we had it last year or the year before, right?
So there's a streetlight repair line item in the budget every year. I believe we've requested level funding, and I think the requested amount was $75,000 But I haven't seen the mayor's budget yet, so I can't comment as to whether that is level funded, cut, or increased.
Now, you said a 30% increase in labor costs?
Correct.
Well, can I ask that question now, Mr. Chair? About, does he think it would be cheaper for us to hire?
I think that's still more of a budget question, Counselor, because we're not going to hire anybody right now.
Right.
That's not what the request is for. I think it's more appropriate to ask that during budget session.
All right.
Because if the mayor puts a budget before us in the next couple of weeks that sticks with a private contractor, which I assume it will because we signed a contract just now, right? How long is that contract?
3 years.
So it's a 3-year contract. It's kind of a moot question at this point. We just signed the contract. So, but, I mean, that's a budget question. That's the position the mayor is taking with the commissioner on how they wish to go. I think the questions for this order should be more in line with what this transfer is looking to do, not what we could have done alternatively to do this work. This is to do work that we don't typically have budgeted for the year that he stated earlier about replacing parts, replacing poles, putting these lights back up, and getting ahead of next year's budget with parts in stock. So these are things not covered in the existing streetlight budget.
Okay, then let me ask him this question. With the increase of 30% and 25%, and with people coming up and asking, hey, I want a streetlight in front of my pole, are we going to say, yeah, go ahead, by the rules, every other pole?
So we try to assess that on a case-by-case basis. We try to stick to the every other pole as a general rule of thumb. But sometimes we can't place a light every other pole because there's transformers on them, or maybe there's trees obscuring light in between poles, so they need to be every pole as opposed to every other pole. So it really depends on the actual issue. If there's an area that's well lit by lights being on every other pole, then that's what it is, and we wouldn't necessarily support the addition of another light to brighten up an otherwise already bright and well-lit area. But if we do have a request for a street light in an area that's dim and prone to crime or something like that, then that's something we'd have to consider.
Okay, my question to you, I got, in my ward, you already know that, there's a light that's up, there's trees there. Is this guy here, that we're signing a contract, going to cut the limbs up so the light was shining after they fixed it?
So we have a separate contractor for tree cutting. His name is Mark Flagg. He's the
Right.
guy we have under contract right now. So the streetlight contractor wouldn't necessarily be responsible for cutting trees or anything. If they're assigned a repair task and say there's a branch that's right in the way of a light that they need to access for repairs, I assume they'd cut the branch to be able to complete their work.
Okay, so you're telling me that you're going to hire a flag to just come down and trim around the light fixture, not cut down a tree?
Right, so if we had an issue like you're saying, it would be, all right, we'll get Mark Flagg out there to take a look at it, see if he can trim the tree. If he can't trim the tree appropriately, then we'd consider removing the tree if needed.
Okay.
But we'd have to balance, the aesthetics of the tree and the value that it provides with, the public safety that would, be improved if we were to cut down the tree and improve the lighting.
Okay, and my final question to you, and then they can do what they want. How are we going to handle this? Is this contractor coming out for one light, or are you going to have a set number where he comes out for?
So in the past, we had Daigle Electric, and they would basically wait to build up a little bit of a backlog of lights to basically spend 3 or 4 days in the city, and they'd do that approximately once a month. So once we address our initial backlog, we'll probably get to a similar system where requests will come in, there'll be 3 or 4, and then they'll come in for a week, spend the week fixing those 3 or 4 outages, and then, repeat the cycle the next month. But right now, we have an extremely large backlog because we haven't had a contract in a while, a contract with a contractor. So the goal would be to try to complete that entire list, that entire backlog as quickly as possible. So that depends obviously on the contractor's availability, because I'm sure they have other cities and towns that they service and whatnot. So we'll try to get them out here as quickly as possible to address that backlog, but it's going to take some time to work through.
All right, then I'll let you go, because I know I'm going to get asked this question. You're probably going to get asked the same question. After they get caught up with the backlog, and you say, we're going to work with, just say, 10 a week. If a guy calls up, like Boschman calls you up on July 1st, saying, hey, I get the street light out, and come December 1st, saying, now all the backlog's already caught up, and we're in 6 months later, and the light hasn't been fixed, what do they do? 6 months
So
down the road.
that would be a performance issue with the contractor that we'd work to address. A 6 months lag time between us assigning a task for repair and them completing it, in my opinion, is an unacceptable level of performance. Now, that being said, we do have situations where we have, say, a motor vehicle strike a pole
Yeah,
and
I
damage
understand
the
that.
light, and we use a company called Munitech to pursue the insurance claim for that repair. That takes a lot longer than simply just working with our contractor and our funds to assign a task and get it repaired. Sometimes that process can take almost a year, and it's pending litigation and whatever else they have to follow through on their end to get the money to complete the repair. So not every situation is the same, but situations in which we're assigning tasks to our contractor using our funds, I would expect that repair is completed in a reasonable amount of time. Several weeks to a month maximum.
Okay.
And just to touch on the other issue that you brought up, just really briefly, we used to have an electrician on staff. That electrician was able to take care of minor streetlight repairs, but if we have an issue where you need to replace a whole pole, for example, that requires a crew, not just
Right.
a single electrician.
Right,
So
I
you're
understand
talking
that.
about, multiple additional people, multiple pieces of equipment like a backhoe or an excavator, dump trucks, so on and so forth. So it's really beneficial to have a streetlight contractor that can handle some of the bigger jobs, or if we have a whole lot of outages at once, can handle that volume, as opposed to just hiring one electrician on our staff to take care of those.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
Council Van Hazigen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I applaud this appropriation. I think we do have a backlog, particularly in the downtown area where a lot of lights are on freestanding poles. And there are a lot of areas where they've had to come down due to safety issues. They've just deteriorated over time. So I'm excited about this, and I hope it's enough that we can catch up and get back to regular maintenance.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve 124-22.
I second it.
Motion made and seconded to approve 12422. For no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 12522, in order that there be and hereby is transferred the sum of $100,000 to be charged against reserve for snow and ice removal and credited to DPW traffic signal expenses, traffic signal maintenance.
So again, I'll just read the letter that I submitted to Mayor DiNatale. The DPW respectfully requests approval from the mayor and city council for the appropriation of $100,000 from available funds for the replacement of traffic signals at various locations throughout the city. The majority of the traffic signals throughout the city are in excess of 20 years old, with the exception of those that are at the intersection of South Street and Electric Avenue, and those currently being replaced at the intersections of Main Street, Putnam Street, and Oliver Street, and the intersection of Boulder Drive and Putnam Street. The older signals frequently require repair and are becoming costly to maintain. In addition, newer style signals use more modern technology that can help improve the flow of vehicular and pedestrian traffic. The requested funds will be used to replace and/or upgrade traffic signals and equipment at various locations throughout the city, including replacement of the control cabinets at the intersections of Main Street and Academy Street, and Summer Street and Harvard Street. We truly appreciate the assistance and support of the mayor and city council in this effort to improve the city's traffic signals.
Council Boschman.
I'll yield the floor to Councilor Ian.
Council Van Hazigen.
I'm just curious, how far can this go? Because I know traffic signalization can get pretty expensive very fast. Is it really just those two cabinets and then some additional minor repairs elsewhere? Or what's the scope of what we'll see done?
So we had gotten a quote about a year ago to address those two intersections, and the quote was roughly $25,000 to $30,000 each. My guess is that quote is going to be a little bit higher because of increased labor and equipment costs. So I'm guessing we'll probably spend roughly $60,000 to $70,000 on those two intersections total. So I'm hoping to be able to add maybe some cameras at other intersections to improve the function of those intersections, basically. So I'll admit, I don't know as much about the traffic signals that we have in the city as Gary does. So I'm kind of relying on him to identify which ones need the most repair or the most urgent repairs.
Right, and I think any improvements we can make to those signals to better adapt to changing traffic flows, the better, because I know there are many intersections where the timing just doesn't reflect where the cars need to go. So if we can have more modern equipment that can adapt to that, I think that's great. It'll help out a great deal.
Right, and what we can also do is use some of this fund to have that traffic light contractor come in and evaluate intersections and make sure that the timing is correct and there's no malfunctioning parts or anything like that. Even if it's not a replacement, just kind of an evaluation just to optimize each intersection.
Yeah, I mean, just if I could throw it on the list, South Street and Winoostock, extremely heavy traffic flows in the morning and evening. And I think that could be better time to adapt to where the cars want to go versus turning. Just something to keep in mind.
Sure.
Council Boishman.
I was gonna say the same thing, South Street and Newsnack Road and the old Kmart, right there, those,
Kmart.
you always get a backup. I've never seen a backup so far, especially on South Street and Newsnack Road. It comes almost all the way up to my ward. That's pretty bad. You know where my ward is. You got all of South Street going up Electric Ave, it's backed up.
I'll add those to the list. Some other ones that we're considering that have been identified as problem intersections are Water Street and the Citrina Bridge, and then Bemis at Water Street.
Bemis at Water Street?
Yeah, there's some issue where the people taking a left are being interfered with traffic coming straight across. So it's caused some issues.
Yeah, but I thought the Mass DOT put those in. How come we don't go back after them?
So DOT put them in, but there are signals where we control that intersection there. Unlike, say, Lunenburg at John Fitch, those are DOT-owned signals.
Now, well, I get you here, well, you're here too on this. Do we get tagged, do you go to some of the Montezuma Regional Planning meetings and advocate for Fitchburg?
I don't, but that's something that the previous commissioner did, and I'm going to start doing, yes.
Okay, that's all I want to know. Thank you. Go ahead, Anthony. You got a question? I make a motion, we accept then.
Second?
Motion made and seconded.
And on the motion, I'm excited to hear that the lights that are going to get fixed are Ward 6, and that we're going to get some of the traffic flowing better in my ward. That's great to hear.
I brought up.
Motion made and seconded to approve
know.
12522. Objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Whoop, sorry. Didn't tell him. Although there are no objections, we'll take it under unanimous consent. Thank you. So much for me silencing my device. 12622. Order that there be and hereby is transferred from within the sum of $500,000 to be transferred from reserve for other municipal purposes, capital expenses, and credited to DPW capital expenses, street repair, for the purpose of paving Industrial Road. I will just read the letter here from Commissioner Erickson to the mayor. It states as follows. The funds will be used to repave Industrial Road from Westminster Street to Game On Way. This stretch of roadway is approximately 2,500 feet in length, the majority of which was last paved during the late 1990s. It is in very poor condition with pavement condition index score of 30 out of 100. The road has asphalt sidewalk along its eastern side with asphalt berm on both sides. Industrial Road serves a number of businesses and residences. It has heavy truck traffic throughout the work week and heavy passenger vehicle traffic throughout all days of the week. Although the wearing surface of the roadway is well past its anticipated service life and has failed considerably, the overall profile of the roadway is in acceptable condition. Given this consideration, the DPW will use these funds to mill and repave the wearing course of the pavement. Damaged sections of the existing asphalt berms and sidewalk will be repaired, but we do not intend on full replacements. We truly appreciate the assistance and support of the mayor and the city council in this effort to improve the city's roadway infrastructure. Questions? Or Commissioner, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
So I'd like to add two things. One being this road was selected because the utilities are relatively up to date. There's no issues there. Unitil has contemplated running a gas line from the end of Industrial up Game On Way to the new Game On facility. And if that's something that they wish to pursue, we'd like to have them take care of this work ahead of the paving. So we're in talks with them right now. That was kind of a last minute thing that just came up earlier this week. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is that with the addition of the Game On facility to the city, we're bringing in many, many residents from not only within Fitchburg itself, but outside the city to this facility every weekend, every week. Large-scale tournaments, you could see in excess of 5,000 cars there. And this is their first introduction to the city of Fitchburg for those coming from out of town. And the road is in horrible condition. It's one of the worst in the city. And I think it would be a good thing for the city to appropriate this money to repave it, not only for the businesses that have been there since the early days when the industrial park was constructed, but also for the new businesses that are going in there. Game On, which has just opened its doors recently, and they're talking about expanding already, which is fantastic. And then the residents of Victoria Lane who have to travel this corridor every day to get to their homes. So that's it.
Council Van Hazinga.
So do you think $500,000 is sufficient to do this level of work, just considering the width and length of the roadway?
I do. If we were doing a full depth reconstruction, I think we'd need considerably more money. But I think if we take a mill and overlay approach, then this $500,000 should get it done. What we can consider and will consider is milling deeper on the travel lanes than we are on the shoulders of the road. And that should save us, not on milling, but on the total tonnage of asphalt that we place. So that should reduce the cost overall.
Great. I think another thing that would be wise to consider is the pavement markings after the repaving is complete. I know one of the hard parts about this interaction between the different users of Industrial Road is all the traffic that goes on at events for Game On. And there has been efforts to segregate that traffic to the side of the road, to one side, to keep it from interfering from the residents traveling with Victoria Lane or also the other businesses, Industrial Road. And it may make sense as we're repainting traffic lines after the repaving to factor that in and maybe have them explicitly painted into the roadway. Just something to consider as we have that opportunity.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Council Boschman.
When you say full depth, what do you mean by full depth?
So full depth reclamation is when they come in with a big grinder and grind up all the asphalt and mix the asphalt into the subgrade, into the gravel base, and then pave a full either 3.5, 5.5, 7, whatever thickness the road needs asphalt on top of that. So in this case, we'd just be milling off the top, 3 inches in the travel lanes and a little bit less on the sides.
Like you did on Airport Road and Oak Hill Road?
That was cold in place recycling. So that was milling up the existing surface, injecting it with an asphalt foam, and then putting it back down and then paving a top course on top. This would be more similar to what we did on Summer Street, where you just simply come in, mill off the top, kind of failed pavement layer, and then replace that top layer.
Is the underlayment good enough for it to hold it? If it's all breaking on top, I presume it would be all breaking down at underneath it, won't it?
So usually when there's a base failure like that, you have a lot of depressions in the road and a lot of big whoops and dips. And we don't really see that on Industrial Road. We see a lot of potholes where the top wearing surface has delaminated, then we've come back and put asphalt in there. But if you look at the overall crown of the road and profile looking along its length, there really isn't anything that indicates a major base failure there. It's very similar to how Summer Street was. It's just that wearing course that's really failed since the original paving happened in the late 90s.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah, I drove through that road 2 weeks ago, and it was a minefield. I couldn't believe it. And the road otherwise doesn't have any dips or divots. It's nice and straight. It's nice and flat. It just, there's holes everywhere. So, and with the existing use of that road, with all the traffic now, and the business usage, it makes sense. So, do you have any idea, estimate-wise, how long this pavement will last? I mean, what's the going rate with this kind of work now? Is it 15 years, we hope, or?
Usually, you can expect 10 to 15 years out of pavement nowadays. It used to be
Before it starts to
upwards of
crack?
20. Before it starts to crack, because we're doing a mill and overlay,
Yeah.
it does open us up to the potential for cracking sooner than installing brand-new pavement. I would say we'll probably get like a 7 to 10-year life out of it before we see any real substantial cracks. And we're also trying to bring back kind of a pavement rehabilitation process in the city and do a lot of crack sealing, because that gets you kind of your best bang for your buck when it comes to pavement
I was
maintenance and all
hoping
that.
you'd say that, because I haven't seen crack sealing in our city in a long time.
Yeah,
So,
it was, I don't want to get into the particulars,
yeah,
but
you don't have to,
different
yeah.
philosophies with different individuals. So I'd like to bring back crack sealing moving forward. I think it's a great way to protect our investment in the
I've
roads.
seen many roads in our city with crack sealing done, and they don't look any different than they did 10 years ago. I mean, the sealing really prevents that large-scale deterioration, at least in the roads that I've seen, so. But we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. That's not the purpose of this order. I always get asked, how long do these roads last? And, it's roughly 10 years before you start seeing some cracks in the armor.
Right.
So, especially with our kind of weather here, so.
Yeah, but preventing the water from getting down into the subgrade is essential, so that's why the crack sealing helps.
Councilor Boishman.
One final question. Unitil, you talked about Unitil. How long are we going to give them to make up their mind if they're going to go up there all the way? I'd like to see them go all the way up to the Game On with the gas line, personally, because we just said, we voted a couple months ago to allow them to put holding tanks in. So I think they would do better off with a get straight gas line going up than having the tanks.
Yeah, and I think they're also looking forward to future development of that adjacent land and whatnot. So they've got the soccer facility. I've heard rumblings about maybe a hotel going in up there or something like that. So we don't want to give them too much time because we want to get that road paved. But on our end, we still need to go through the contracting process with a paving company and all that. So we've got at least a month and a half or so. So if they can get moving and work quickly, then I think they can get it done within the next month or two, and then we can come in right after and pave.
Okay, all right. I
Please
make a
do all
motion.
you can to make sure that I know we want to rush them, but
Right.
let's make sure they do it first. I mean, even if it were 2 years from now, that's going to upset me, unless there's something major that happens.
Yeah, I
Because-
absolutely wouldn't. So once it's paved, that starts a 5-year clock that they can't dig anyway.
Okay,
So
okay. Because there was something that happened on Water Street a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this, where we paved that section, or the state paved it. And then literally 2 weeks after it was paved, there's a huge trench that was dug right through it. And I'm going, well, that didn't get coordinated right, because, but I think the state was mostly involved with that, but I don't know. But
So, yeah,
I just
in
don't
that-
want to see that happen again.
in that case, DOT came in and paved. That was kind of a Hail Mary that Commissioner Laxo threw at the state to try to get them to pave it. And they said yes, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, Verizon came in and needed to
Yeah,
replace
they just
a
came and did it
conduit
and
there,
walked
so.
out. They didn't care what was happening after that. Anyway, okay.
Make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to accept 12622. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. 12722 is an order that there being hereby is appropriated the sum of $400,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to DPW admin expenses, stormwater contract services. I'd like to say that this is Councilor Boschman's favorite topic. And let me just quickly read the letter here from the commissioner. It states as follows: the $400,000 from available funds to cover the cost of various stormwater drainage improvements throughout the city, maintain compliance with the city's municipal separate storm sewer system MS4 permit from the Environmental Protection Agency, and fund the cash match for several grant applications related to stormwater. Drainage system improvements will consist of rebuilding and rehabilitating existing drainage structures, including collapsed catch basins and manholes and failing drain lines, and installation of new drainage infrastructure to control areas of flooding and/or erosion. This work is necessary ahead of any paving that the city performs, and an appropriation for available funds will help us to preserve Chapter 90 funding for additional paving. Compliance with the city's MS4 permit requires ongoing work on a multitude of tasks that will be performed using a combination of in-house staff, summer interns, and engineering consultants. This includes the following: dry weather outfall inspections, annual catchment area investigations, GIS mapping, preparation of various studies and reports for submission to the EPA, and required annual training, reporting, and record keeping. And finally, the city has submitted several grant applications that will require cash commitments from the city to move forward. These grant applications include the following: an asset management planning grant from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to complete GIS mapping of the stormwater system, begin performing condition assessments of the system, and begin prioritizing problem areas and associated repairs. A culvert replacement municipal assistance grant from the Mass Division of Ecological Restoration for the replacement of 2 aging culverts on Ashby West Road. These culverts are along streams that are tributary to Lovell Reservoir, which is one of the main supplies of drinking water to the city, and a municipal vulnerability preparedness action grant to identify and design stormwater and green infrastructure improvements to be included in the city's downtown combined sewer separation project, which is beginning the design phase now. This work is mandated by the city's consent decree from the EPA, and the grant application will help offset costs to the sewer ratepayers. Commissioner, anything you'd like to add to that?
So this is the third year, I believe, that I've been in front of you asking for an appropriation from free cash for stormwater purposes specifically. And this results from the EPA's more stringent MS4 permit that they issued us a few years ago. So at some point, we'll need to figure out a more sustainable way to create funding to address these needs. But right now, that hasn't been decided. And I will add that the COVID-19 pandemic kind of threw us off course. We kind of had tried to start developing a more sustainable funding source. But obviously, the pandemic hit, and the last thing we want to put on our citizens is another fee or tax. So that's not something that we've pursued right now. So as the letter says, this will be used for MS4 permit items, drainage system improvements ahead of paving work, and cash matches for these 3 grants and potentially others as they come up throughout the next fiscal year. The first grant on the list, the asset management planning grant, we have secured. The culvert replacement municipal assistance grant and the second MVP action grant for stormwater green infrastructure improvements. Both of those have been submitted as applications, but we have not heard yet from the respective agencies as to whether we've been awarded the grant funds or not.
So I'll just start by saying that while we have gone this avenue, I remember, I think it was 2019 it was, where my colleague, Councilor Boschman, has been consistent in his pushing for some type of resolution, how we're going to address this long-term with respect to having the ratepayers pay, businesses pay for the maintenance of our stormwater system. Kind of like what we do already for charging a fee for stormwater use, for wastewater usage, water usage, another enterprise, if you will, or something to that effect. And I remember the discussion at that budget hearing was, you know, we were in talks with consultants, what that would entail. And I do remember the mayor at that time addressing Councilor Boschman and saying that the options before him were not palatable for him. So this is and then the pandemic hit. So I don't know how the mayor feels today. Probably a good discussion to have with him when he's before us during the budget hearing, because this covers money out of fiscal '22. For fiscal '23, I am assuming the mayor is taking the same approach he's taken since he's entered office, and that is give the bare minimum and then free cash once it's certified. But I haven't seen the document, obviously, but that'll be a discussion that we can have at that time during that hearing. So I really want to keep this discussion to questions on what this money will do, why it's important, and not get into the whole long-term issues or budgetary matters, because that can be addressed in a few weeks when we get the package. That's just my position as chair. Let's keep this to the order and what it's going to accomplish. In terms of long-term funding on this effort, that is a very appropriate question for the budget hearing when he's before us in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. So, Council Boschman, I recognize you, but let's please not go down that hole in this meeting.
I give you my word, I won't.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Nick, Mr. Commissioner, first of all, are we still involved, can I ask this question, are we still involved with the different communities that when he set up at one time, when he first came in on the MS4, working together?
Yes, we're still part of this. It's the Central Mass Stormwater Coalition, and we are still part of it. We still leverage some of the products they put together with their coalition funding for public education and outreach and so on and so forth.
Okay, and how are we making out? I'm not going down that road, I'm just asking how are we doing on the catch basins? That's the major one, because I got petitions in that since 2014 and nothing, they haven't fixed them yet. So how are we working on those? Pretty good?
So in-house, we've fixed more catch basins over the last 3 years than I think we ever have. Talk with me offline about the ones that you have outstanding that haven't been fixed, and we'll make sure they get fixed. But this money funds supplies to make sure that happens. And then obviously our DPW labor budget supports the staff to actually go out there and make the repairs.
Now, are we still working on the GSI mapping, or is that all done? I thought we hired that out to contractors, like some help college kids getting a degree.
So we've been working on that basically since I started with the city. It's a long process, and we've been chipping away at it. We've used a combination of consultants who go through and update our GIS mapping as they're out there in the field doing dry weather outfall inspections and catchment area investigations. We've also used summer interns when we can. We haven't been able to hire them for the past couple of years because of COVID-19. But we did use them several years ago to complete some of the mapping. And the asset management planning grant that's listed in here, the goal of this is to take that mapping with the GIS system across the finish line. So take what we have, finish the mapping, and start figuring out how best to prioritize repairs and other needs within the drainage system.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I just want to say something. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Erickson, the commissioner, because if it wasn't for him teaching me all this stuff about the MS4, I wouldn't know nothing about it. So if those questions that rise up, that I bring up, you can say he taught me a lot, seriously. And I give that a compliment, because I didn't know anything about the MS4.
The MS4 stormwater matter is a tough matter to stomach for me, because it's like the sewer separation, although with the sewer separation, that was in part the city's fault. But, you know, MS4 came about how many years ago? 6 years ago, 7? It was fairly recently. And what the EPA and the DEP love to do is they love to find ways for the city to spend money it doesn't have with their mandates. They have these mandates, and they don't fund those mandates, so we're on the hook for the mandates. And when I say that, some constituents go, well, don't you think we need to have adequate storm systems? And yes, I'm not disagreeing with the mandate goal itself, but for the federal government or the state government to just walk in one day and say, hey, you know what? We're going to force you to do something that covers your whole city, and we're not going to give you a dime to do it, is easy for them to impose, but difficult for us to implement. And because they also know that we get all the arrows as counselors if we, God forbid, ever did a rate with them, a bill, because we look like the bad. It's like, you know, your state and your federal government is making us do something that is noble, but there's no funding attached to it. So it's painful. The sewer separation thing and this always drive me nuts, because we did take the federal government to court, I believe, on the MS4, or other communities did, because a lot of communities were like, well, you can't just drop something like this on our lap. And I think, I don't recall, but I think we failed. The court case was not in our favor, but...
There were some minor changes to the permit language, but ultimately it stayed the same.
So, I mean, I don't know what's next with them, but We never get any assistance from them for these kinds of infrastructure projects. They talk about infrastructure bills every day of the week, and yet, how much money would it cost to fix all of our stormwater issues?
Tens of millions, I'd say.
Okay, but tens of millions to the federal government is chump change. So it's just, drives me crazy. Like, that's true infrastructure that we need, that we cannot pass on to the residents. They are strapped enough. So I hope, I will support this because no other option to me makes any sense. Is at a time when our residents are paying 2/3 more for sewer than they are for water. So it would be a real hit to them. So I support this avenue indefinitely until we figure out something else. So that's just my beef with this whole matter because I can't stand these unfunded mandates.
I'll make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 12722. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 12822, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $460,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to DPW capital expenses equipment. And Commissioner Erickson's letter to the mayor states that this money will go towards the purchase of various vehicles, equipment to replace those in the DPW fleet that are unsafe or require frequent repairs, such as a Freightliner plow truck, $220,000. This plow truck will replace a 2001 International plow truck. The parts are getting hard to find, and the truck is subject to frequent breakdowns and costly repairs. A 1-ton pickup truck, 2 of them, for $90,000. These 2 1-ton pickup trucks will replace a 2000 Chevy 1-ton and a 2007 Chevy 1-ton that are past their useful lives and are in very poor condition. The frequent mechanical failures are not only costly, but also present a safety concern for the drivers. A half-ton pickup truck for $40,000. This will replace a 2001 Ford for the cemetery division that is in very poor condition. A stump grinder for $50,000. The stump grinder will replace the 1978 stump grinder that has outlived its useful life and is no longer safe to operate. And 2 sander bodies for $60,000. These 2 sander bodies will replace units from 2003 to 2006 that are rotted, cracked, and can no longer be used for winter operations. These are the sander bodies and mounts only, not the truck chassis.
Make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to accept the spending order for $460,000. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 12922, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $196,500 to be charged against available funds and credited to Parks Capital Expenses, Parks and Playgrounds. And this funding will, page here, oh, here it is. So these funds will be put towards various park improvements. They include a lawnmower with bagger for $15,000, a Steamline trail repair work, $20,000. This will include replacing the fencing damaged by falling trees in areas that have been washed out along the trail. Coolidge Park Loop Trail repairs, $25,000. Funds will be used to regrade the walking path at Coolidge Park, place additional stone dust, and address localized drainage issues. Morinfield Parking and Security, $90,000. Funds will be used to pave the access drive and parking lot and install bollards between the parking lot and soccer field. The existing gravel parking lot, soccer field, and irrigation system are frequently torn up and damaged by vehicles doing donuts and other vandalism. Paving the access drive and parking lot and installing bollards between the parking lot and field will improve accessibility and help reduce the damage vandalism that occurs. Cogs All Trail Grant Match for $6,500. DPW applied for a Mass Trails grant to obtain funding for improvements to the Whale Rock Trail in Coggeshall Park. The scope of work includes access improvements, brush clearing, installation of water bars and water dips, minor trail rerouting, and new signage trail marking. The grant requires a cash match, which this funding will be used for. And the Coggeshall Park tree removal, $40,000. There are a number of trees at Coggeshall Park that are dead, dying, and pose a safety hazard to users of the park. Funds will be utilized to remove these trees. Questions on this slate of spending? Council Boishman.
Yeah, on Colzall Coolidge Park, very happy with the move on that, and fixing the walk around. It's needed it, it's always, when it rains, it's always full with water, you know what I mean? You can't walk, you gotta walk on the side. My only question to you, are you gonna plan to expand it bigger, wider, so you get 2 to 3 people in line to walk, or is it gonna be the same?
We're planning to keep it the same width. Depending on how far these funds go, we could consider making it a little bit wider, but it'd be something I'd have to look at out there and make sure that it's feasible around the entire length. I'd like to keep it the consistent width the whole way.
So we're gonna do a real good job on that for the walkers, right? To make sure it's done right? Because a lot of people today, you probably know it, on your way home, you see people walking it all the time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
since-
I come that way in the morning, I see people walking at, 7 a.m., and then I go that way on the way home, and I see people walking at 6 p.m., so definitely gets a lot of use.
So I want to say thank you to Nate and the Parks Department Board for putting this stuff in. You won't give me, I'm not going to give you a hard time about it. I'm all in favor of it. So, if you get any questions, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor.
Councilor Cruz.
To kind of get into the Moore and Field parking, the 90,000 there, the bollards definitely make sense to me if we're getting frequent vandalism and cars doing donuts on the field, which is ridiculous. But to my constituents who are concerned about us paving a parking lot and not using that to our many damaged roads, what answer do I offer to them? Why are we doing the lot instead?
So the issue with the lot is that people come down with their cars, especially when it's soft after rain and muddy, and they do donuts in the parking lot too. And every time they do that, it leaves 1 to 2 foot deep ruts that the DPW then has to come back and fill in, or users of the park just have to deal with. And that's one of the nicer parks that Fitchburg Youth Soccer has to use. And we'd like to make it an attractive place for people that use the park for soccer and whatever else. There's also a lot of recreation that is available behind the park that I don't think a lot of people know about. There's trails that wind down along the river there. It's Phillips Brook. You can actually get almost all the way down to McTaggart's Pond Dam and whatnot. So that's the reason for paving the parking lot in addition to installing the bollards. Bollards would obviously prevent cars from getting onto the field and damaging the field, but they'd still be free to come down the access drive and do donuts in the parking lot, which causes damage to the gravel surface.
I remember when I was playing soccer as a kid down there, they had just kind of a fence that kept people out at the top. They had like a swinging gate. We don't have that anymore?
I don't know that we have a fence there anymore, but that's something we could definitely work into the scope with the parking lot and security improvements.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a great idea, actually. I mean, that's a public park, right?
It's a public park, and I know Fitchburg Youth Soccer uses it, so that if we were to put a gate in, we'd need some level of coordination and make sure
Right.
it's open when the Youth Soccer League uses it, but.
You can just close it at night when you gotta think the
Well, that's what I'm
majority of the
thinking. Yeah, that's a
vandalism
great idea,
occurs.
because to pave it and then have it be destroyed by, I guess you could call it vandalism, would be very frustrating to see. You gotta protect that money that goes into there. So, that's a great idea.
I think it's four-wheel drive, off-road cars that go in there.
Whatever it is, it's tearing up the road, so.
Yeah, four-wheel drivers, the kids with the four wheels.
And it's not like, beyond 9, 10 p.m. anybody's going down there anyways to use it, so a night gate to shut it, I think that's the only way we get in, is that steep down entrance there, so a swinging gate there it's a thought.
Yep, we can certainly consider that with this funding. And I just want to add, $90,000 is quite a sum of money, but in the grand scheme of paving dollars, that's, it wouldn't get you that far. You could definitely not pave a road for only $90,000. So, it's not like we could take that $90,000 and instead decide to do a paving project on another road.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to approve 12922. If there are no objections, I'll take this on unanimous consent. Seeing none, it passes. 13022, order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $800,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to DPW capital expenses, street repair, for the purpose of paving Clarendon Street, which I will note is in Ward 2. The letter from the commissioner to the mayor says that these funds will cover the cost of reconstructing a portion of Clarendon Street. Funds will be used to reconstruct Clarendon Street from Electric Avenue, Franklin Road to Daniel Street. This stretch of roadway is approximately 3,100 feet in length, the majority of which was last paved in 1995. It is in very poor condition with pavement condition index scores along its length ranging from 30 to 39 out of 100. The road has sidewalks on both sides from Daniels to Delisle, and a sidewalk on the eastern side of the roadway from Delisle to Electric Ave, Franklin Road. The DPW will use these funds along with contributions from various utilities to perform full-depth reclamation and paving of the roadway and replacement of the sidewalks with granite curbing and concrete. Although we anticipate being able to complete this full scope of work with these funds, this is subject to the bid prices that we will receive when we bid the project out. I'll just ask one question on this. With that last piece of the statement, pending bidding, are you confident in this, comfortable in this 800,000? Like, did you guys have an estimate with the inflation and the costs they are today and say, add 100,000 to, I mean, I just want to make sure we're covered, there's no surprises. Because if we approve this and you come back and say it's going to cost, let's say 900,000, we would, I mean, I'm not getting, I don't want to get ahead here, but I would assume we would obviously give you that supplement. But to avoid that, does the 800,000, is that a conservative estimate?
It is a conservative estimate. We also have a substantial amount of donations from the various utilities, particularly Unitil and the wastewater division. So altogether, I think we'll have more than enough funds to do the sidewalk and the roadway. If we run into a situation where we don't have enough funds, we could consider cheaper alternatives for the sidewalk, or we could consider, instead of putting down 5.5 inches of pavement, narrowing that down to, say, 4 inches of pavement, which would save on mix.
If the inch depth, does that keep the road longer, last longer?
It does, and you want a thicker depth for roads that are more heavily traveled.
Because we just talked about Industrial Road being about 3 inches reclamation or repaving, and that'll get us roughly 10. I mean, where I sit, I say go the distance, because, you know, when we do these roads, we have to forget about them for 20 years. You know,
At least
so,
20 years.
I mean, at least 20, because this one hasn't been done for almost 30. And you see the condition is. Plus, it's had a lot of work done on it, right? There's been a ton of utility work on that street, hasn't there been?
Yeah, Unitil went in 2 summers ago, and then last summer, Polito Construction went in and did the combined sewer separation work.
Right.
So I'd just like to add, too, this would be full-depth reclamation as opposed to just a mill and overlay like we're proposing for industrial. So that takes the existing asphalt and grinds it into that top layer of soil. So it creates a nice firm base, and then you put your pavement on top of that. So
Plus, I like the idea of the curbs and the sidewalks going to the granite. That's a big upgrade over the asphalt, and you know, puts that to bed too for a long time. So very happy to see this, of course, and I'm happy to see that the city is doing all it can to supplement the chump change we get from our friends at the state legislature. You know, people who say that we're not doing enough to the mayor and the city council, you know, this will be $2.2 million in city funds that we've put in the last 6 years, and since I've been on the council, we never put a penny beyond Chapter 90. So I hope that these orders are recognized by the public, that we are trying our best to make up for the gross negligence of our state legislature.
So I agree. This is huge. This $800,000 is huge. The donations from the utilities are very important as well.
How much is that, the donation? What are we getting from them?
We have roughly $380,000 from wastewater division, and I'm not sure on the Unitil number. I'd have to double check, but probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 30,000 or so.
So that's about 330. That's on top of the 800. So this total project's going to cost, we think conservatively, 1.1 million.
Well, 380. Sorry if I misspoke. Plus the roughly 30K from.
410.
So 410 plus the 800,000.
So just think about that for a second. That is enlightening for the public. So this project's not going to cost 800,000. We're thinking conservatively, it's going to cost upwards of 1.2.
With new sidewalks.
With new
yes,
sidewalks.
Which would be our entire Chapter 90 budget for a year on that one
You
street.
just went one step ahead of me. So this one road with sidewalks, and this isn't the whole Clarendon Street Road, this stops at Daniels. 3,100 feet with new sidewalks is our entire Chapter 90 budget for 1 year. One road and sidewalks. I
So
mean, the
just-
magnitude of the cost of these things, people just, I don't know if they don't comprehend it or they don't want to, but this is why we're in a big hole.
Yeah.
And the cost of these is so massive.
Paving is one thing, but when you add in sidewalks, that dramatically increases the cost. So like Beach Street, for example, we did a similar, road reconstruction, new concrete and granite sidewalks, new paving. That was roughly $800,000, and that was a slightly shorter run than what we're proposing here, so.
Well, we need new sidewalks. We talk about all the time. Sidewalks, in my opinion, are just as bad as streets. They go hand in hand, and even more so for pedestrian safety, but also for ADA compliance. So when we do these pavements for streets, we should do the sidewalks too. As much, even if we have to eat more costs, we got to do it, just to get it off the list, because the list is endless. So, but that's just striking to me that this one project is our entire Chapter 90 allotment, which should tell the public that what we get from the state is a joke. No, that's as nice as I'll put it. Anyway, Council Boschman.
I'm going to put a smile on your face. I know I'm a critic of the mayor, but I do want to say thank you to the mayor. As much as I hate to say it, but I have to. I want to say thank you to the mayor. And I also want to thank the Commissioner, Nick Harrison, and Gary Willington for their support on this project. When I talked to them, they agree with me and they helped me out a lot. So I want to say thank you to you and Gary. And the residents of that street are very grateful, because it is bad, really bad. And I have to agree with Marcus. I think you should go the proper way. If it costs for 5 or 6 inches, do it, because that road is very, 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 very heavily trafficked. A lot of traffic on that road, up and down. And I'm glad you're doing the sidewalks. But I do have one thing to say. If you go up there and look from LaGros Street up to Franklin Road, I think we just did those recently, before I came in as a counselor, but I'll let you guys decide. I know from LaGros Street down, up to Daniel Street's really bad, but from LaGros Street up, I don't think they're that bad or broken up. You can look at them. My other question is, you're going to take the trees out, right?
We'll take them out as needed. If there's nice trees that can be preserved, we'll try to work around them. But generally, we're going to need to take them out.
Now, are you going to, at the same time, like the previous commissioner did on Summer Street, they planted trees on the sidewalks going down? Is that going to be part of your goal, to do the same thing as you're doing this project, going up Clarendon Street? To give it, and the reason why I asked that question, when I was a kid, Clarendon Street looked like a country road when I was a kid. They had trees on both sides of the road. It looked very, very pretty. With the design in the fall, the leaves changing and everything else. And that's why I'm asking if you're going to have trees put in, because one of my requests when I first came on was to have trees put up on Clarendon Street. I would have to check with the residents, because, some people don't like to rake the leaves, but you can't have both. You can't have beauty and no shade, so.
Yeah, we hadn't planned on adding trees, except in areas where there already are existing trees. So if we need to cut one down, we're going to try to accommodate putting one back. We'll likely work with the Greening the Gateways Cities program. That's a program funded through Mass DCR, and they can actually provide the trees for us. They did that on Summer Street. They planted all 4 of those trees for us. We just had to install the pits for them. So that's definitely something we're looking to consider to replace whatever we happen to end up taking down.
As long as they don't break the sidewalks up. I don't want to spend all that money, and all of a sudden, 10 years down the road, if I'm still around, the sidewalks are all crumbled again because of the trees going up, not down.
Yeah, so we did 2 things with the Summer Street tree pits over there. So we used a special soil substrate that supposedly lets the roots grow without popping the sidewalk panels. It gives them little cavities to, expand and do their root things. And then second is we worked with DCR to pick trees specifically for that area, so they wouldn't grow too tall to grow into the utility wires, and they wouldn't get too big to start buckling the sidewalks and all that. So we'll take that same approach.
Okay, I appreciate it. If there's no other questions, I'll make a motion, we accept.
By all means.
Was there a second? I didn't hear it.
Second?
Okay. Motion made and seconded to approve 13022. There are no objections, I'll take this in unanimous consent. Seeing none, it's approved. Last but not least, 13122, in order that there be and hereby is appropriated the sum of $575,000 to be charged against available funds and credited to DPW capital expenses, Oak Hill Road Bridge repair. And this letter on this order states as follows, that the funds are to design the rehabilitation and replacement of the Oak Hill Road Bridge, which is in very poor condition. Temporary repairs were made in 2016 and 2018 to prevent full closure of the bridge. Jersey barriers remain in place to keep traffic away from the most deteriorated structural members. The requested funds will be utilized to cover the engineering consultant design costs. While the project has not yet been determined to be a bridge replacement or rehabilitation, we anticipate the total design cost to be $575,000 based on feedback from our on-call engineering consultants. It is unclear at this stage what the total construction costs will be, but this number will be developed as the design work progresses. This is a proactive approach to the permanent repair of the Oak Hill Road Bridge to prevent any emergency actions or closures due to deficiencies revealed during routine Mass DOT inspections. Commissioner, anything you'd like to add to that?
So just to add, Mass DOT conducted an inspection recently, and the structural members of the bridge continue to fail and show signs of rust and loss. So it's imperative that we begin working on a solution to address these problems now instead of waiting. It's gone through various stages of repair since 2016. We haven't been able to come up with the money to move forward with the design, so that's why we requested this money from the mayor and yourselves. So we're hoping to move forward with the design. We've also got some indication from various state entities that the infrastructure bill will be aimed at taking shovel-ready projects and funding those. So the goal here is to get something that's shovel-ready and continue to look for opportunities to pursue grant funding through these infrastructure bill programs that are being developed.
Council Boschman?
Again, I get a question though. Didn't we talk about that last year, you and I, and then I talked to the mayor and he called you up? I thought we appropriated the funds last year, no? You
Nope.
said it's this year?
No, it's this year, because I don't think I was commissioner. I think I was commissioner when you and I talked about that, and that didn't happen until this past January, so.
Okay. So again, I want to say thank you to the commissioner. And again, as much as it breaks my heart, I have to say thank you to the mayor, because he doesn't really have to do it, but he did. Because he sees the need of Ward 2 and how they need the effects. So I want to say thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your help again, and to the mayor. So that'll put a smile on your face, Marcus.
I don't,
Yeah, I'd just like to add,
you can
too, that
criticize him as much as you want.
the Oak Hill Fire Station is right there. So if, God forbid, we had to close this bridge for any reason, that's going to drastically increase response times to West Fitchburg. So we want to try to avoid that. This is a proactive approach to attempting that.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I make a motion, we accept.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to accept 13122. If there are no objections, I'll take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. If there are no objections, I'll take that under unanimous consent. Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.